Welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome and introduce Barbara Cavanagh and Miranda Macon from Albany Senior College. And many of you will know of Albany Senior College, the first state-funded senior high school in New Zealand, which opened about 8 years ago. And prior to that, Barbara was principal of Ngaruawahia High School and Te Awamutu College. Barbara is a passionate educator, as most of you will know, who has worked on many professional associations which mentor and support teachers and principals. Barbara's AP, Miranda Macon, joins her today to demonstrate how they have exercised leadership in their professional inquiry model at Albany Senior College. Barbara and Miranda, we welcome you both to You Learn 15.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, no te kura mātua o Albany. It's a pleasure to be here. As we've just heard, I'm Barbara Cavanagh, and I'm the foundation principal of Albany Senior High School. And Miranda here is the associate principal, and she has been on this journey for the full 8 years. And I guess, you know, we're entitling our session today, Lead with Meaning, Leading with Meaning. Because, you know, you can choose. You can choose to be a leader, or you can just choose to be a maintainer. Now, it would have been very, very simple and easier and much more popular if we had opened an old school. And we had that potential. We could have very easily done that. And as I say, people would have loved us. You know, it would have been a nice feeling for us. But actually, we had to decide, is that what we're going to do? Or do we actually think about the kids now, what they're needing now, what's the research saying now, and is that what we want to do? Because the thing about leadership, it's not about being popular, and it's not about being someone that that people can say lovely things to all the time. That's nice though. But it's about picking up the challenge. It's like thinking, whoa, this has been done badly. There's traditions here that are not good. Let's challenge everything, put everything up for grabs and see what a real school for kids now can look like. So I think that was the challenge that we had, and we've kind of, you know, like over the last few years, been a little bit cautious about being open about what we're saying we're doing. But at this point, after 8 years, I think we're able to front foot a little bit more and say, I think what we're doing is pretty good. I think it is. And so we'd like to share some of that with you today. You will have heard the story, I know, some of you, about the silverback gorilla. And if you've heard it already, then it's good for you to hear it again. That's all I can say. So here he is, the silverback gorilla. He's the leader of the pack, and he has a silver streak down his back so that he's instantly recognised as the leader. The greatest threat to the pack has always in the past been the leopards, and the leopards rely on the pack spreading out so they can pounce easily on one gorilla. So you see the leopard comes up and they all like this, and he grabs one like this. So the answer that this old silverback gorilla comes up with is if he lines all his mates up behind him, the whole pack up behind him, then actually the leopards don't know what to do, because all they can see is one gorilla. So that's his solution to that. And it's cool, it works, because then the leopards all run away. The problem for old Mr. Silverback, though, is that now the biggest threat are the poachers, and they've got guns. So there's a threat, he sees the threat, thinks, great, I know what to do, line all the gorillas up behind me. So the poachers come in and go, all done, all gone. So poor old masterback gorilla, thinking it's a good solution. He's got a good solution for an old problem, but it's not a solution that's going to work for now. All that's happening is that the poachers get a good shot. So you've got the poor old gorillas dying out. He's destroying the very ones he loves. He wants to do good for them. He's the leader after all. He wants to do good for them. But what happens is, as you see, the race is dying. He's got good intentions. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but it's not working. So, what we want to talk about today is about what is leadership? What is it? And I want to make it very clear to you, we'd like to make it very clear that leadership doesn't exist on its own, as a thing on its own. Leadership always has to have a context. If you are leading a school, and all of you are, to a degree, leaders. You're leading a classroom, you're leading groups of teachers, or you're a principal, or you're in the leadership team. If you're a leader in a school, can I just strongly recommend that you don't go to a generic leadership course. You can get that on the internet, 8 things to be a good leader. Number 1, have a vision. Number 2, blah, blah, blah. Number 3, get people on side with you. Number 4, blah, blah, check the vision. That's on the internet. If you're the leader in a school, the best learning that you can do is to learn about learning. Learn about learning. And you, as the leader, be the expert on learning. Don't leave it to anybody else. Nobody else's responsibility but yours. Be the expert on learning, because things have changed from schools. When we went to school, things have changed from 10 years ago in terms of what we now know about how the brain works. If your school is exactly the same today as it was 10 years ago, you're on the wrong track. You need to start looking at things that can change. Your big question that you should be grappling with day and night, it should be your passion, how do kids learn? How can we create an environment where every student becomes a successful learner? How do we do that? It hasn't happened in the past. You ask the kids. You ask them. I tell you why we kind of found it in some ways quite easy to develop different things at a school. We had what we called community dialogues, where we got parents to come in and we did world cafes with them. And we said to the parents, we're not going to talk for the first half hour. You're going to tell each other about your experience of secondary school. Well, you can imagine what that was like. And then, there were tears and all sorts. And then we say, do you want that for your kids? No, we don't. Okay, let's start now. What do we actually want for all our kids, for every single one of your kids? And you know yourselves, if you're parents, your 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids, they're very different from each other. You can't have a one-size-fits-all school. That doesn't work. It works for some, it doesn't work for others. So how can we create that environment where every kid gets that strong sense that they're a winner? And that basically the world is privileged to have them in it because of the strengths and gifts that they bring. That's a big difference from the kind of attitudes we've had. We need to sort these kids out. What I recommend strongly, just have a look at some of these books here. If you're a leader in a school, have a read of this book, Leadership Mindsets, by Linda Kaiser and Judy Halbert. They're Canadian researchers, and they talk about that very thing, that we've got to make a big mind shift when we're thinking about schools. Shift from, we've got to sort these kids out, we've got to know who's the brainiest and who's the dumbest. That's really important, and we'll test them, and we'll find out which class they should be. If they should be in the brainy kids class, or should they be in the dumbs class. That's what schools are about, secondary schools I'm talking about. And so, we line them up, and you go this way, you've got a gift, you're in the gifted one. Oh, sorry, you've got no gifts, you go down to that one. That's what we do. And we do it on a daily basis. And just like old Mr. Silverback Gorilla, we are destroying kids' lives. It's as simple as that. So read it and see, and read it and think, how am I going to change the systems at school so they actually benefit everybody? Have a read of Building Learning Power. You know, these books by Guy Claxton, they're wonderful. You know, like, how do we get kids to really flex that brain muscle he talks about? What kind of conversation should we be having with kids? You know, it always got to be in that conversation of possibility. You know, this could happen, this might happen. This is what I'm thinking now. What are you thinking now? So that we don't talk with kids in kind of fixed ways like they did when we were at school. This was the answer. Here's the answer. Write it down. And this is the exam. Now, we've got exams, but we've got to sabotage that. We've got to make sure that as leaders in our schools, we're actually following what the research says. If you haven't read, you will have all heard, I know, of Carol Dweck and her Mindset book. She's saying that it's effort that creates brains. It's not brains from birth. So here, I mean, that's huge. Because seriously, we have believed in the past that some kids are bright and some kids are dumb. We have believed that. And we have designed schools that match that belief. That's what we've done. Now read it. I say to you, read it. And if you don't, then you're neglecting your duty as a leader. Same with John Hattie, Visible Learning for Teachers. You know, really, if you haven't read that and really engaged with the 8 mind frames or the 6 mind frames that he has at the end of the book, if you haven't engaged with that, and, you know, he's talking then quite specifically about the way you can influence learning of each child in the classroom. You're influencing that learning. Now, it's a big book, and I've just made one sentence about what it's about. But again, if you engage with that research and if you believe in it, you can say, oh, that's a load of crap. You can say that if you like, and we'll just carry on like Mr. Silverback and we'll destroy half the population. You can do that. That's your choice. But if you're a leader, you won't do it. Another book I can recommend is this one by Brian Goodwin, which we've used a lot, called Simply Better, Doing What Matters Most to Change the Odds for Student Success. Lovely, light, easy read that can actually turn your school on its head, make your tail spin, let me tell you. So, you see, what I'm saying is that you have responsibilities. You know, it's funny, I was having a haircut the other day, and the hairdresser said, oh, so what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm going to this conference talking about how schools need to keep informed in what they're doing, because otherwise we just keep creating old schools. And he said, isn't that interesting? He said he'd just been on a hairdressing course. He said, imagine, Barbara, he said, if we cut your hair like we did in the old days. You know, he said, you'd come in here, I'd get out the big rollers and I'd roll it all down, you know, and I'd straighten it all out and I'd spray it with hairspray, you know, and off you'd go, and you'd pay me big money for it. Not as big as I pay for him now, I have to say. But I didn't point that out to him. But but that was so interesting. Any other profession, you don't stay in the dark. You're moving on. You're making changes. You're engaging with what's new, engaging with what really, really matters. That's your job. That's your job. We have used, and the books that we're going to refer to today are 2 that I'd strongly recommended. Today, what we're going to really, really engage you with is how do teachers learn best, and what's the role of the leadership team? You know, and we've used Helen Timperley's Realising the Power of Professional Learning extensively for that, as we've used Student-Centred Leadership by Viviane Robinson. We're extraordinarily lucky in New Zealand to have such globally recognised researchers. And you know, again, I encourage you to get yourselves very familiar with these books when you're thinking about leading and making change in your school. You see, these are the old ways of thinking, and they still persist. You know, we still hold on to those sort of things. We don't even know we do it. They're built in tradition. They're steeped in tradition. It's that tradition that binds us, really. It's kind of got us bound up, and we can't kind of fight our way out of it. It's the tradition that says that when kids come to school, some of them are really bright, but some of them are really dumb. And we need to sort of make sure that we locate those dumb ones together down there and kind of look after them and fix them up. Fix them up is what we need to do with those ones. We feel a bit sorry for them. We can be nice to them. You know, I mean, one young man came from another school and he said he'd been in the bottom class at another school for a couple of years. He said, oh, the teacher's really nice. We just didn't do anything. We just didn't do anything at all. And he came and we had no streaming. He was going, I'm as bright as they are. And suddenly he was getting merits and excellence. He said, I didn't realise. You know, it's kind of, we make judgments about kids all of the time. And we've got things in the primary schools like national standards that help us do that. And we've got NCA at secondary schools that help us do that. But we're the leaders. And we work with those constraints that we've got to make sure that no kid feels like they're a failure or a waste of space, or every other bit of language that teachers use to put kids in their place. It's not good enough. One of the expressions that we use at school all the time, and I have to say teenagers love it, it's not if you are bright, it's how you are bright. And our kids say that with great pride, really, at our school. You know, it's not if you're bright, it's how you're bright. The one thing about teenagers, and I don't ever say teenagers these days, blah, blah, because I think that makes you just look old and pathetic. But one thing I do think that teenagers are always, they like what's fair. Things have to be fair. And it's a strong driving force for them. And so when they say this, they start to, you can see, oh, but at this school, you know, the kids who are doing drama, the kids who are dancing, everyone's got their own talent. You know, and that's the kind of language and the kind of culture you need to be thinking about. Because there's not one kid, people are just different. And we need difference to make the world function. And you know, that thing that we do in New Zealand a lot is Maori kids learn best when they work in groups, or they learn best when they kinesthetics, or they learn with their hands. Maori kids this, Maori kids that. I can tell you, I mean, I've been principalling out of Waihiā High School, Te Awamutu, I can tell you that Maori kids, some do, some learn really well in groups, some don't. Some hate it, being in groups, and prefer to learn on their own. Some kids are kinesthetic for sure. They like doing things with their hands, and they like doing things with their brains, surprisingly. You know, these kind of things hold us up. You know, girls learn best when? What, all girls? You know, I mean, Indian girls and Pākehā girls and Maori girls and Korean girls, they learn best when? It's not feasible. You know, boys learn best when? You know, it's just, and the boys learn best when is quite a big thing at the moment, isn't it? You know, boys need to be blah, 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 blah. Some do, some don't. It's not like that. And the biggest thing is that we've got in our heads that we've got to make sure that kids succeed well. And somehow in our head, we're also saying that if some kids succeed, then these other ones have got to fail. Somehow we've got to show... Yeah, because how else can you be successful if there's not a big group that fails as well? I think the school C system did that to us, you know, and we accept it. We teach along very happily. Oh, and what do you know? For 40-50% of the kids didn't pass that assessment. Well, you know, they just didn't get it. They're just not bright enough. They're just a bit dumb, actually. I'm a good teacher, that's for sure. I've been teaching like this for years, just like old Mr. Silverback. I'm a good teacher. But, there's destruction happening all around me. Not my fault. So, you know, we've got to challenge these things and stop the nonsense. Because what's happening is, it's these beliefs that are informing our school systems and what we do. Today I just wanted, we're just going to, and I'm going to ask Miranda to pick it up, just to talk a little bit about our Ashes leadership journey in terms of our professional inquiry. Now, I need to say that there are things that I'm proud of at our school. We've got big open learning spaces, we've got no classrooms. Every Wednesday, despite the fact that we've got NCA pressure, our students are doing student-led projects. They design their own projects and work with outside stakeholders. We've got a tutorial system that is taking up a whole class period. We've got just 3 long periods a day rather than 5 or 6 periods or 7 periods. We've got a lot of things that I feel, you know, really like we're moving. We haven't got the answers all, let me tell you. You've got a long, long way to go, and you never get there, do you, anyway? But I'm proud of all of that stuff, and as a school, I mean, Miranda has been from the beginning, we're proud of it all. However, having said that, the thing that I'm most proud of is our professional inquiry model. I get absolutely emotional, I have to say, when our teachers are presenting. We have a Tuesday morning presentation, and sometimes I'm listening to these teachers and I'm thinking, whoa, you don't know what a big shift you have made, and you don't know how unusual that is to make that shift in the way that you're doing things. I just want to hand over to Miranda for a minute, and then we've got you to read something.
Good afternoon? It's probably not quite yet. I'm Miranda Macon, as Barbara's already introduced me. And I just wanted to share with you, we're talking about leadership with meaning. And I wanted to share one of the struggles that I went through very early on coming to the school, because we were going to talk a little bit about our leadership journey. It takes us to a place around professional learning, but it was a very personal struggle for me. When I went to Albany Senior High School, it was the first senior leadership position I ever had. Prior to that, I'd had a lot of different experiences at different schools in leadership. But the leadership context that gave me meaning was science. I was a passionate, experienced science teacher, ultimately. And it was such a safe place to be. I kind of, when my staff would come and we'd be nutting out problems, you were coming from a place of knowing, of a place of certainty, really. And then having to move into the senior leadership situation, all of a sudden the context, my identity as a leader, had gone. And in terms for me, my personal identity, that was a huge struggle. And I remember it was Yulun 8 years ago in Rota Vegas, walking along the road with Barbara, about to go to one of these sessions, and I thank God it was raining, because she asked me how I was, and I was so emotional about it, this turmoil and conflict I was going through. There were tears, and hopefully the rain hid my tears, Barbara, hopefully. But, it's actually, I share that with you because there are two things that I have really reflected on. The first thing is when we're talking about learning, and professional learning is included in this, when we're really tearing at the fabric of what we know and who we are, that can be a really difficult and uncomfortable space. It is a struggle. And then the second thing that I bring from that is actually I had to reflect hard on, well, where was my leadership purpose? Where was my leadership attempt? I didn't have science anymore. And then I went back and thought about, well, why am I teaching? And I actually think my leadership meaning comes from probably where we all find meaning in teaching. That we want to make a difference for the students who are in front of our class or in our classes now. We want to give them more opportunities. We want to give them a better life. And I think that that probably is a uniting moral purpose for everybody here. And it didn't change moving from that place of science to that place of senior leadership. What I have done in between times after all this growing and reflection and learning is I've also looked at leadership research and actually how important we are in providing those opportunities. Like Barbara said, parents are giving us their most precious things to open up those opportunities. Research, the research that I was looking at, also tells us that in a classroom, if you as a teacher can add value, you're not just adding value to that student at that moment. There's a piece of research by Chetty in 2011, and he was linking value added by teachers for students at school and then their adult tax records. The opportunities that we provide in school and the growth that we provide goes far beyond school. The students that had value added by their teachers had better earning capacity, they lived in better neighbourhoods, they engaged with education for longer beyond school, they saved for retirement, they had, in a way, better lives. And that was because of the opportunities afforded by quality teaching. So then that gives me even more purpose as a senior leader. Well, how do I help teachers in their quest for quality? And that brings us back to this professional learning.
Okay, what you've got under your seat, which is why we were trying to, we'd just like you to have a look at, particularly at the quotes from Helen Timperley's book, and just have a bit of a quiet read for a minute, and just to see, we wanted to know, how did we ensure that teachers learned? What did we need to do to make sure that teachers really learnt the things that we wanted them to learn, or that they needed to learn from the kids? Have a chat with each other. Okay, and when you finish reading, just with the person sitting next to you, just have a chat. Like, is there anything there that challenges your belief about the way teachers learn? Or is there anything that challenges the way you do things at your own school? What's the challenge there for you? Is there a challenge? Does that just excite you and think, yeah, cool, we do that already? Just have a chat with someone. Yeah. It's 12 o'clock now. No, you'll go to 12:30. We can finish a bit early. Yeah. I've lost my filters. Yeah. No. Good. And talk about the board funding master's paper. Okay, listeners, we've got time maybe for people burning to say something. 2 people. Go. Anybody? Yep. Yeah, I think that's a really, really important one, you know, because what we're good at, and again, I can only talk from the secondary context, but what we're really good at, we gather heaps of information about kids, don't we? We're really good at it. And we know that this, you know, we know what their ASTL scores are when they come in, and we know that they may have PATs, that we know all of that. And it makes us feel like that we've done our job when we've got all that done. You know, it makes it feel like, yep, we're on the right track. And now my next job is to sort of fill that kid up or get that person. That's the default position, isn't it? And I can report on that. But the next step has to be, or the step way before that has to be, how is this kid learning? And what I'm doing making that connection? Now, you're going to talk about ako because...
I think it will come up, but not...
Well, just, there's an interesting Māori word. I learnt Māori many years ago and was a bit dumbfounded and thought it was slightly ridiculous, the word ako, which meant both teach and learn. I thought, well, that's weird. Why would that be? Actually, it makes a heck of a lot of sense now, because actually it's the dynamic that happens between teaching and learning, and neither of them happen unless the dynamic's there. And I think while we're just doing this business, while we're collecting information about the kids and they do something, we collect it and we record it and we report on it, while that's all we do, we're missing the whole point of our core, which is to talk with the kid, and this is what Miranda's going to talk about today, is to talk with the kids about where did I miss? What did I miss? You know, you haven't achieved in this assessment. What have I missed for you? I've missed something here. Can you help me with that? It's a different sort of conversation, so I guess that's what it's about. Yeah, that's our default. Okay, cool. Yeah, the other one. Cool. Okay, look, I'll hand over to Miranda now, and but I wanted to say this one thing about our board, and you might like to go back to your boards and ask them. When we set the school up, we had a very supportive board, supportive in the terms of they wanted us as teachers and leaders to continue learning. And they have, as part of their commitment to us, they will pay for anyone who does master's papers, or doctorates. So currently we have we've got 4 DPs, all studying education leadership papers. We have got 6 other teachers doing leadership papers as well, and we've got 3 teachers, Miranda, one of them being included, embarking on doctorates. Now, I have to say that has informed our practice along the way so much. And what's interesting, I kept thinking, this is going to come to a standstill at some point because there's a hell of a lot of money going out on master's papers, as you can imagine. But what's interesting for me is that the board sees over and over and again, even our business manager, and it will come, and she's as mean as, and I hope she listens to this, me talking, because she is, but she will say, this is the best bang for the buck, is teachers doing master's papers who can then come back, and it influences the way we work. Because the thing is about teaching and leading schools, as you know, it is rocket science, isn't it? It's not for the faint-hearted. So I'm going to hand over to Miranda now, who will just talk you through our professional inquiry model journey.
So can I just ask a question about that payment of the Masters and PhD? Are they paying for the papers or
Yep.
are they paying the time?
Both. Yep.
So we've talked about the importance of, as senior leaders, how do we support teachers in their quest for quality? And I know most of you will be very familiar with the diagram that's from the New Zealand curriculum around teaching as inquiry. That was where we have started our journey. The exciting thing for us about teaching as inquiry was that it was a model of professional learning that actually took into account how unique every single teacher's individual classroom is. You know, from the different students that are coming into your classroom at the different times of day, the different subject areas, the different ages, because it is such a unique mix, the response, your teaching response, has to be able to meet the needs of those unique learners at that time. So teaching as inquiry allows us to be responsive to meet our students' needs. So that was a huge change from that one-size-fits-all, kind of professional development that a lot of us, certainly I've been brought up and I was very used to. just drawing on some work that I've been involved in readings, that type of thing. Viviane Robinson's work and May Lai's work puts teaching practice in a context of problem solving. And what I mean by that is every time we go to make a practice decision, we are sometimes on the trot making lots and lots of these decisions every day, but we're making a decision of what is best going to meet the learning needs of my students in front of me now to get them to the place I need to be. And the reason I want to talk about these practice solutions is because often we're making these decisions based on what we know to be deep-seated truths and beliefs about our students. Now, I want to just draw some attention to another piece of research that I came across when I was doing my work. It was by a woman called Christine Ruby Davis. There was also someone, Hamilton and Hattie, was involved in this research. It was in 2006. What they were looking at were teachers' expectations of students and how those expectations translated to those students' achievement. Now, what they did is they linked expectation with achievement, and they found that for the groups of Māori students, the practice decisions teachers were making maintained their level of achievement for the entire year. They looked at that in comparison to non-Māori students, and they found that teachers were making practice decisions that actually increased levels of challenge. So non-Māori students were making higher gains across the year. Now, I just want to share that because I don't think that that's coming from a place of, of wanting to do bad or ill to any of the students in front of us. But what it does demonstrate is how these deep-seated beliefs about student groups, we just draw on those automatically to inform our solutions. And sometimes these beliefs are flawed. And one of the wonderful things, if we do inquiry well, if we do it rigorously, we can actually begin to uncover some of those beliefs that we have about groups of students. And Barbara, you were talking about these generalisations are not helpful. And so if we can uncover those beliefs, then we can start to think differently about the possible solutions. And that opens up a whole new repertoire in our practice. It increases our quality practice because we have more repertoire to draw on to meet the needs, the many needs of the students that present in front of us. Teaching as inquiry is a way that we can interrupt those automatic solutions, practice solutions that we come up with. But it doesn't happen all the time. What we found when we started, and we started by just implementing the model from the New Zealand curriculum, we did training around it, we worked with staff on it, we had a focus group of teachers and middle leaders and a senior leader who worked with staff to develop our approach. And then we gave good time to it too. We spent a lot of time. We don't do any other professional, kind of compulsory professional learning as a school. It is all professional inquiry. That's what we spend our time on and we dedicate our time to. And we also try and share our learning by presenting with each other. So we put aside, in the past we put aside half a day to present our learning together, to share what we've learned. What I found really interesting watching this learning was the variety of learning that people would bring to the table. Some seemed deep and rigorous and was going to make a difference for our students and for the students in the classroom. And some of the inquiries that were being presented were just, were driven by interests of teachers which were quite separate to the students in the classroom. So we started to talk about this as a senior leadership team. The other thing that I was really interested in at the time, I was actually quite taken by one person's presentation. Her name's Cherie Muggeridge, and she is on maternity leave at the moment. She's going on to study leave. But she just surprised me and really influenced the way I was thinking. She's a maths teacher, and she was presenting her inquiry, and she talked, and she's larger than life, she's got huge personality, hugely confident, you know, she's just a firecracker, and you never cross her, just by the way, never. But so she was presenting, and she always presents with such passion, and I couldn't quite believe it. She was talking about, you know, she'd taught these kids how to structurally, you know, she'd scaffolded the way to answer these questions. She taught them the scaffold, and they should have known, and they went into this test and they didn't use it, and over half of the students failed. And the level of emotion, and she said they didn't fail, I failed, because the students didn't understand how to make sense of the problem. I wasn't teaching them how to think, I was teaching them how to apply a framework which didn't make sense to them. And the thing that struck me about her presentation, because she went on and she started to look at thinking, you know, and her intervention was very, very different for these students. And they had huge success based on that work that she did. But the thing that struck me about it was the level of ownership that she took for those students who failed. She owned their failure. And that was hugely motivating for her. She believed that she had the ability to open up the opportunities to achieve for those students. And she did that. So my motivation when I was starting to investigate the variation of the ways inquiries were enacted, I wanted to see if motivation, if people believed the situation was urgent, would it be a more successful inquiry for them? Because I looked at her inquiry, huge success change for these students, and I thought, gosh, you know, she felt it was a successful inquiry. As a senior leader, how do you help people get successful inquiries? You can't direct people entirely, so how do you do that? I wanted to figure it out. So I did some research around that, found out, bottom line, teachers' motivations for doing their inquiries, when they were around student engagement, student achievement, and the locus of control was with the teacher, they found those inquiries really successful. When teachers were motivated to do an inquiry because they had management issues with students, the students were running amok, and the locus of control was with the student, those inquiries were not successful. What I'd still found really interesting, and this informs where we moved to, was that there were hardly any teachers that saw the failure of their students in their class as a crisis or as an urgent situation. There was not a lot of, there was not a lot of looking at the kids that were there present for the learning. They had been taught, the students hadn't learnt it, so the teacher hadn't taught it. So with all that information, all that thinking, and there was a lot more as well going on, because as Barbara said, our senior leadership team has been involved in master's level papers and research, and so we were talking about theories of learning, those deep-seated beliefs. How do we help bring those out to the surface? How do we help people learn? So all of that conversation led us to the model that you see on the other side. That is our reframing of teaching as inquiry. And so I've given that to you as a handout, and I'm only going to refer to a couple of particular key points. You'll see where the motivation has come for these parts to be included in our professional inquiry. Barbara suggested, and I think it was a brilliant suggestion, and staff breathed a sigh of relief. The model of teaching as inquiry, when you're first trying to get to grips with it, it's really hard. Where do you start? What do you do? We knew we wanted to start with the students in the class and make a difference for those that were in crisis. So we turned this into a linear model. As we're becoming more confident with it, I don't think it's as necessary, but boy, we had to develop our expertise and confidence to start with. So the first part, which is the focusing inquiry we start with, you'll see, and I think I might need glasses, which is a sad, sad thing to say right now. we actually asked teachers to name the student. If you name the student, that's a learning relationship, a learning contract you have with that student. It makes it harder to wiggle out and to say it doesn't matter. You know who that student is that you're intending to make a difference for. We asked people to, identify a crisis in the classroom. And the crisis, and I know it sounds like deficit theorising, but the intent of that was not to be deficit at all. It was to identify the students who were present for the teaching, but didn't get it. Their learning needs were not met. So they were in crisis. Their opportunities are in crisis. So we wanted people to use data to help them justify the students that they were going to make a difference for who had not found achievement yet. At a senior school, our students choose the subjects they want to be in. They all expect that they will have some level of success in these subjects. They've chosen to be there. So it's our job to actually find that success for them. The other thing that you'll see here is about theories. Putting your theories of what created that learning need on the table. It actually helped to distance people's deep beliefs. You're not putting your belief on the table, something that you own and then could feel like a personal attack. It's just a theory of what might be. It may be wrong, it may be right, but it offers up that opportunity for scrutiny around your beliefs and looking for confirming and disconfirming data. We also asked, we know for learning that different views, different theories are really important. Understanding the problem that you're trying to solve with your practice solutions, understanding that in different ways. So you'll see as well, we've asked for alternative theories from different people within the school, including the students. And I know this isn't rocket science at all, but I was amazed how many people bypass students who probably know their learning needs pretty well and what they didn't get. And to include them in the conversation has been very powerful for our teachers this year, because we've really made that a driving focus. The other thing that I think that this does, and Barbara was talking about that collateral damage, the 80% that come through and walk off with their opportunities open, they're probably going to do that no matter where they go. But there are the 20% that don't find success, and actually we need to turn that around for them and figure out where their success lies. And basically, this is the mechanism that we use to try and do that. Now, I was going to ask, or just give you some space, because I'm not sure how many of you use this kind, or teaching as inquiry and inquiry model for professional learning. Can I just see how many schools are involved in that? Yeah. And I mean, from your experience, do you find that it's, does it challenge your beliefs and assumptions? Has it changed your teaching practice? Have you found it a useful tool to use? I think there's some nodding happening, so, that's really good. It's interesting as a senior leader, then we've put this routine in place, but is that enough support? Has that really achieved what we're hoping it should achieve for teachers' learning? Barbara, was there anything that you wanted to? No. Okay. Oh. Okay, so as I said, we became real experts in our routine as a school. We also, routines are interesting because they can be seen in a couple of ways. One is that they are very structured and they stop innovation happening. They are very conforming and they make it really hard to be innovative and to move away from that routine. So it can increase a level of feeling of compliance. The work that I've been reading recently is that there is an intrinsic duality in routines. There is that structural side, which is helpful because it helps us as senior leaders try and get teachers to get their bang for their buck in terms of their learning. But there's also the human factor in routines. That duality, the dual purpose. There's that human way of interpreting and enacting routines. So routines don't have to just be about stifling innovation. Okay? The human factor, the human side of it, needs a lot of support. And that's why we at our school have brought in a more distributed leadership model, and I don't think it's different in many other schools, to be honest, where middle leaders take a lot of responsibility to support the professional learning of teaching staff. And so we have timetabled meetings for our middle leaders to meet with staff, to talk about the process and how the learning's going for them, as well as having time to talk to other colleagues and teachers. And our thoughts around that were that middle leaders would be able to help teachers inquire more rigorously, to learn more effectively. You know, I mean, that's what the big push is always. How do we support that? But we didn't know if that was working. So that leads us to the next part, or the next where we're at probably at the moment, of, well, what? What are the kinds of interactions for middle leaders with teachers in professional inquiry? That brings me to the research that I've just finished. It was looking at, okay, we made assumptions that distributing leadership of teaching inquiry was going to be really useful, really helpful, affect learning, support learning. So we put this system in place, but we didn't really know what was happening. So I thought it was a great opportunity to find out about that human side of the routine. How were we enacting the conversations that matter together between leaders and between teachers? What's really, this is just the overall findings of the work that I did. To give you an idea of what it involved, I was working with 5 different case studies within the same school. So 5 teacher leader peers. I got them to record their professional inquiry conversations, 3 sequential conversations. I then interviewed the teachers and the leaders to find out what the intent of those conversations were, and then I synthesised all of that information, did the analysis, and came up with some conclusions. What's interesting is that every single case was very unique, but there were similarities between cases. And it allowed me to actually group these cases along a continuum of who controlled the conversations. Where was the locus of control in these conversations for the teacher's professional inquiry? You have on the left, I think, category 2, where the leader is controlling the conversation. Category 1 in the middle, where the conversation control is shared. And category 3, where the teacher is controlling the conversation. Each of those categories had quite different outcomes for the kinds of professional inquiry and the learning that actually happened for the teachers. So I'll just go back, because this is about leadership. And where do middle leaders, where do we get our ideas about what leadership is? Because I bet, and I know from my experience as a middle leader, I didn't get a lot of training in leadership. It was just through, doing my job well and trying to be a quality teacher. I mean, how many people here have had formal training in middle leadership roles? Okay. So can I actually see a show of hands so we can have a look? Okay. So maybe 5, 6 people, maybe? 6, maybe 10, say 10 people out of a room of over 100. So, the support that we give our middle leaders in terms of training for leadership is minimal, really, on the whole. So we have to rely as middle leaders a lot on what we understand leadership should be. And often, again, these go to our deep-seated beliefs and societal norms. The importance of being honest with each other, telling people, how their performance is, how they're going in their role. If you have concerns, bringing up those concerns and talking with people about them. In professional inquiry, it might be, well, I'm thinking you need to be working with a different group of students. Being caring and looking after that person, knowing who they are, making sure that they don't walk away feeling damaged after having an interaction with you. But also, a societal norm tells us that leadership, you need to be strong. You need to actually be strong, and you need to know your own mind, and you need to be able to lead and show direction. It's really interesting because the way that these norms played out was the same across those three leadership groups. So those three categories I showed you before, the way our leaders were working were pretty much, by and large, the same. They all wanted to exert a level of control. They had in their minds what needed to happen, and there were different ways that they were trying to influence what actually happened. So one example was easing in their ideas, making gentle suggestions. Maybe you should consider this, or maybe you should talk to these students. Asking leading questions when really in your mind you knew the answer. You had chaos in your classroom and it's because you didn't have enough control. But tell me why you think that was happening. Because I thought it was an exciting lesson. So you in your mind are making unilateral decisions about what's going on. Making unilateral decisions also goes to decide as a leader, as a middle leader, and as in any situation, that we're talking interpersonal skills here. What should I share and what shouldn't I share? Should I share this because it might hurt the person? And I'm trying to be caring and loving to you, so I better not share that because I might shatter your belief in yourself. Not checking that interpretation. And using, in the first category, or the first category where the leader had control, the leader actually used the routine to conform the teacher's behaviour. Rather than talking about, look, I've got some issues about what's happening and I'm not sure about what your thinking is, she stuck to the routine, to the letter, and didn't allow the teacher to have any kind of input or influence over what was going on. What was really interesting, although we all employed, or all of my middle leaders employed similar skills, interpersonal leadership skills, the outcomes of the inquiry were really different because of the different groups of teachers' willingness to learn. So the first category, actually the teacher was willing to learn, but she was overrun. She felt unvalued because she had to stick to this routine rigorously. And so what ended up happening was she did it through compliance, and she never ever worked on her PI in her own time. It was only when these two were meeting and she felt she had to. It was through obligation. She respected her leader as well. So she wanted to do the right thing by this person. Interestingly, the deep-seated belief that this teacher had about the learners was that they were only at achieved level. The kids that were in crisis in her classroom, that was all they were capable of. She did value other people's views. So she did listen to the leader, and she went out and sought other theories, and she talked to the students. She changed her teaching approach. These students got merits and excellences. She still deeply believed that the students were only achieved level. That belief was never surfaced, never challenged, even in the light of that new information, which I think is interesting. And she did not find the value in professional inquiry. It was high compliance for the teacher's perspective. The second category, again, the leadership team brought the same kind of interpersonal skills. But here, the teachers really valued the expertise of the leader. They really didn't know the answer to their inquiry problem. They were really keen to explore. They valued other people's perspectives, including the students. They responded to these perspectives, and they felt that their PI was really successful. And their students improved. They found improvement. I think a lot of this might be also that students feel valued as learners. In category 3, it wasn't shared control, it was teacher control. These two people, again, everybody has good intentions for their students. It was just that they knew the answer before they went into their inquiry. They knew what was wrong and what the kids needed. Even in light of the students telling one teacher, that's not what I need, my learning issue is here, the teacher chose to ignore it. So these teachers actually had complete control. They knew what was going to happen. The locus of control actually of behaviour, what was going on, was with the student, and actually they did different little interventions which actually didn't have a lot of effect. Again, their deep-seated beliefs about these students, that they were senior students and they should be taking more responsibility, that never changed. So it brings me really to the last part before Barbara finishes us. But the new meaning for me that I took away from this in terms of leadership is that our job, if we are leading learning, is that we must create space, no matter which teacher we're working with, whether they already know the answer or they don't. We need to create space with that teacher, to work with that teacher, to learn. So it is a conception of leadership which is around the leader learning alongside the teacher learning, where you don't hold stuff back, where you share what you're thinking and say, hey, I'm not sure about this. Let's go and find more evidence to figure out what direction we should take. As a leader, you're not being strong, you're not being weak either. You're showing what you're thinking, you're making yourself a bit more vulnerable. It's what you're expecting of your teachers. So making yourself more vulnerable in the pursuit of better evidence. Because the more robust that evidence is, the better practice decisions we will be making. And that's what we all want, because that will make a difference for our students. These values, it's interesting. When you start to work in this way, you increase the level of respect and trust of the people you're working with, because you're not hiding things. So trust doesn't have to happen and then this happens. Working in this way creates relational trust. And I just want to acknowledge that actually these three values, they underpin being open to learning. But they are hard. And that is the next part of the journey. Well, how do we support our middle leaders, support ourselves to actually be more open to learning? Because it doesn't come naturally. I tell you what, I don't want to tell people exactly what I'm thinking all the time. I'm not going to tell Barbara, all the time. Well, it probably will. Yeah, probably. But we've got to get past all of that, and that I think will make a difference for our professional inquiry. So that's where I'm at the moment, and where the doctorate begins.
I think Miranda referred to that thing about it being hard, and we spent a lot of time at different times kind of practicing, like practicing having this hard conversation before we went in. And I remember very clearly one of my having in the very early days with our DP Hamish, having a very serious conversation, working out exactly what I was going to say, and I was going to share and be open with this particular teacher, and I did. I went right through the proper process. Felt like I'd done it really well. And just as I was walking out the door, he was an older man, and he said to me, look, thank you so much, Barbara, you're such a sweetie. And I thought, oh my God, that wasn't what I intended. It was like, and I came out, but I'd already committed to going out the door, and I thought, I've completely mucked that up, and I had to go back and think. And of course, it's that whole thing that you do all the time, like, I wanted to be respectful of him because he's an older teacher. So that was coming through. I almost wished I'd had it recorded, because I thought, where did I go wrong? Like, something's gone wrong here. And I think, one of the things when you go down this path of these, the difficult conversations, is that, you don't always get it right. They're hard conversations to have. And, what we've noticed too is that sometimes when the person leaves that conversation, the other person goes straight out and goes, yeah, well, I'm never going to speak to him again, I'm going to leave the school. And you think, oh, but it didn't mean that, you know. And it's kind of like, how do you maintain the dignity of that person and your own dignity? And that's kind of, I don't know, I just guess it's just practice. And it's worth keeping at it and keeping at it and keeping at it. Because if you don't, then things will just get maintained. And you don't want to be a maintainer. You don't want to be a maintainer. You want to be a change agent and really changing things. I just also wanted to pick up with Miranda, talked about, you know, interviewing the students, and there's been some really interesting things happen when a teacher can say really openly to one of the DPs, look, I'm going to find this conversation really hard. And one of the teacher said to me once, you know, look, could you come and be part of that conversation? And it was good, you know, it was great. But what was fascinating was, and this was again in the early days, was the kid was there and I was saying to the kid, you know, tell so-and-so exactly what it's like why you are finding it difficult to learn in his class. And this kid was saying, he said, look, I really like you, he said to the teacher. I really do like you a lot, you know. And he was saying, but the trouble for me is, and what he was saying was, when you write things on the board and I have to put them in my book before I understand them, it doesn't make any sense to me and I lose interest. And that was what he was trying to say. I would like to know, before I write it into my book, I'd like to know what it means. And the teacher was saying, well, I'm not going to teach you like that. I've been teaching for a very long time and I'm not going to teach you like that. And the teacher looked to me for support. Yeah, and it's very difficult. And I realise that the principal should never be in those meetings because actually, you know, you've got to maintain a distance at that point. But what was interesting was that I was taking the kids' side at that point, but not deliberately, but just sort of saying, hey, listen, so-and-so, did you hear what this kid said? Did you hear that? It's really important for you to hear that. You're a good teacher. He likes you. But this is not working for him. And he just would not. He would not give in. So he eventually, you know, we finished the meeting and I felt like I almost had to apologise to the student, but I didn't. And I just I said to the student, how do you feel about that? And he said, well, look, he said, I don't know. He said, I'm surprised because he said, I thought we had a really good relationship, but we obviously haven't. He thinks I'm being difficult. I'm not being difficult. Anyway, I said to the kid, you're actually going to have to give this up. We either find you a new teacher or you put up with it. I don't know how to deal with it at this point. But it's one of those things, isn't it? Wherever you've got to be as a teacher, you know, like we're a heck of a lot invested in being right. Huge investment in having the right answer. Like we kind of, that's what we are as teachers. We know what's good for kids. We know how to teach. We know this. We know that. So those things have been very, very difficult at times. But gosh, they're worthwhile. They're so worthwhile. And when you hear another teacher recently talking about his learning, he's a very popular teacher. Kids love him. And a couple of kids failing, and he took someone else to the meeting, and the kids saying, look, you know, we really like you. You're great fun. This is our best class we come to. But we know you don't really care, you know, you don't, like, they weren't being rude to him. They were just saying, but we know, basically telling him, we have a hell of a lot of fun. We waste a lot of time. There's no expectations. So, and that's cool. We really like you the best. In every other class, they were getting amazing results, you know, and they didn't particularly like the teacher that much. They did, but not as much as this one. So what important learning that is for a teacher, isn't it? Because sometimes we have a lot invested in being popular. So how do you get those? You only get those sort of responses really from the kids. Because you'll hear out in the grounds, oh, hey, sir, you're our favourite teacher or whatever it is, you know. And I remember riding high on that for the first couple of years myself. It's fun when everyone likes you and you're the best teacher in the world. That's great. It doesn't last, though. I remember some little horror saying to me in my second year, oh, we've got Mrs. Lawson, her name was, Mrs. Lawson now, and we don't like her, but we are learning things. We didn't learn anything in your class. And I thought, beg your pardon, I was shocked. But it certainly pulled me up. And I just think, you know, those conversations need to be orchestrated so that we hear them early enough for ourselves, so that we can do something about it. So, you know, we're finishing off now. Look, just come back to our old silverback gorilla here. You know, we're all in this position really, aren't we? We're all kind of in this position where we're kind of steeped in this tradition, and we believe that parents want this. This is what parents want. So we have to behave in certain ways. Because otherwise what? They won't send their kids to, or whatever it is. But this is what teachers, it was good for me, you know. And I just, you know, you look at the silverback gorilla here, you know, and you feel like, and you want to say to him, hey, look, you know, really? You're the leader. Get your act together, mate. You're supposed to be quite an intelligent species. You are. What you could do, go and check out a few of the other silverback or gorilla packs. See if anyone's got it sorted. So when these poachers come along, they do something else. Go and check it out. Maybe you might have to go overseas. Maybe you have to go to your next door school. Whatever it is, go and check it out, Mr. Gorilla. You've also got in your pack some really clever younger people or younger gorillas. Go and talk to them. Send them off to a conference somewhere. And when they come back, check out with them. Talk with them. What is it that they're learning? What is it that we need? As a pack, we've got it all. As a pack, we've got it all. And I really want to impress this on you. As a school, you've got it all. There's no other group really, if you think about it. You had 3 years at university, some of you have had 4, some of you have had 5, some of you have had 6. You're highly educated people. That's the one thing. You're highly experienced. The amount of experience that's in that room when you're in your staff room, you count up the years when you go back, how much experience is there. There's that. You know, you've got it all. You've got the answers in front of you. And you don't kind of need to be wondering what you should be doing or feeling sort of as if there's nothing you can do or feeling that we need to stick with it. You're in the position to challenge your community. Don't let them lead you. Don't let your community be saying, oh, we want this, we want that because we had it when we were kids. But you be on the front foot and say, hey, look, this is the research. This is what we can do for your kids. This is something different. We don't have to do the same stuff at all. And you say that to Mr. Gorilla too. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go on doing that. You're the leader. Lead, for God's sake. And some of you, you know, if you're sitting there and you are paid as a leader, big money. Some of you will be getting $20,000, $30,000 more than the average classroom teacher in your school. And if you're excited about, and because your job is to get the uniform right, and if you go home at the end of the day feeling very good because everyone today had their socks pulled up or their ties done properly or buttoned up, then look in the mirror when you get home and think to yourself, is this what I came into teaching for? Really? Really? Don't do that job. Or it has to be done, but you're the highest paid person around here. Does it have to be done by you? You know, seriously, you've got a responsibility to be a leader. And that's what you need to be in the school, a leader. And you need to be having conversations all the time with your leadership team or the teams that you're in, whatever teams they are. How is the lot for every single student in this school going to be better for my having been here? So if you're not engaged with the likes of visible learning, if you haven't read it and you're not reading it and have no intention of it, if you haven't read Carol Dweck's mindset book and are not engaging with it and thinking, oh my God, we better do things differently, and if you're not reading leadership mindsets and you're thinking, you know, I'm a leader, I'm going to go to this course and I've learned how to be a leader, I set the vision and then I implement it and then I do whatever they tell you to do, all those things. And if you haven't engaged with this, which says if you're a leader in a school, you better be thinking differently. And if you haven't read Guy Claxton, Building Learning Power, and this one, Simply Better, these stunning books that tell us how to be different, tell us how to be, you know, what kind of schools and environments and worlds we need to be creating. if you haven't done that, the stuff that you do might be worthwhile. It might be good stuff, you might feel good about bits and pieces of it, but what I can tell you is that it's not leading. It has nothing to do with leadership. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Barbara and Miranda, for sharing your passion with us today around leadership. And as a curriculum NZC facilitator, you spoke to my heart about teaching as inquiry.